Mike, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, for listeners and watchers who may not be familiar with who you are, although it's a little hard to believe at this point, tell us, who are you?
I'm just a non-elite runner who views running shoes on YouTube, and so I'm just kind of like a regular guy. That happen. I mean, I always try to think of my reviews as you're talking to the guy that happens to be running in the shoes that you were looking at the other day, and you want to know what does that person think. And so that's kind of been a little bit my approach for it. I'm not an elite athlete. I wasn't like an all-American runner in college or anything like that. I never worked at a shoe brand. I'm just someone that runs a lot and tries a lot of different shoes, and I have thoughts. So that's the kind of the very short synopsis of it all.
Well, my first getting to know you question for all my guests is I'm fascinated by the many ways that we find this sport is how did you become a runner?
I became a runner almost, I guess, kind of by default because I started doing it in junior high school. We had a junior high school track team, and it was the only school sport that didn't have cuts. And so, like, if you could just show up enough times, you were on the team. And those are the kinds of athletic prerequisites that suited me at the time. And so it was like not only a natural fit, it was the only fit.
Let's be honest. In hindsight, I think just showing up, we don't appreciate as much as adults. Sometimes you just got to show up
That's
for it
true.
to
That's
stick.
true. Yeah, I mean, I guess there is a lot to showing up. But yeah, and so it was kind of, I always talk of it as like running loved me first before I loved running, and so I'm always very thankful that this kind of sport has that kind of openness to it, where anyone can just show up, and you kind of never know who's going to be decent at running by the first day. I mean, some kids they're obvious. You're like, that kid can run, that kid's fit, naturally gifted. But some are like, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens after 3 months. This kid may be decent. This kid may never improve at all. But let's see what happens when we give this kid a chance. And so, like, running is great like that. And so, it gave me opportunities to be part of something bigger, to be part of a team sport, which is such a big thing, especially for kids of that age, like in junior high. And so it gave me a lot of very positive experiences that not a lot of other sports. I mean, I was playing like town ball for baseball and basketball and stuff like that, but like from being able to put on a jersey and represent your school, um, that was a really cool way for me to be able to do that.
And how did your running career advance after that? Did you run in high school? Did you keep running through college? How did it pan out?
Yeah, I did okay. I was in my running shoe reviews, I always talk about how one of my superpowers is that I'm remarkably average. Like, I'm a reference shoe size, I'm a size medium for all running apparel. Everything kind of fits me because I'm unexceptional. And that's a good way to explain kind of my high school running career, where I was pretty decent, but I kept showing up. So I was like maybe above average, maybe punching above my weight class a little bit. Um, but I enjoyed running in high school quite a bit, but I was never excellent enough in one event to stay in that event for like more than a season. So I've tried pretty much every event there is on the track, to the point where the coach was like, I don't know, maybe you could be a decathlete in college, because you could do all of these events. And so I've tried hurdles, short, like intermediate hurdles. I've done the high hurdles. I've done, the 200, 400, 800 mile, long jump, high jump, and pole vault. And kind of by the end of high school, I ended up with like long jump, high jump, pole vault. And then they threw me in a hurdle race to round out like a dual meet. So I was doing a little bit of everything. And I did okay. I ended up doing pole vault
Did
for a little bit in college, but Division
did
three.
you?
So again,
I mean, that's amazing. I want to say, did you have a favorite field sport? And yes, apparently, yes, it actually you did it in college as well.
yeah. Sorry, I kind of got away from myself there, but yeah, pole vault was the most fun because it involved the least running. It felt like. And so I was definitely one of those kids where, when the coach is just like, all right, you guys go out and go warm up in the woods for like 20 minutes, do the loop. Some of us would kind of, not every day, but some days, run far enough to get out of coach's eyesight, hide for a little while, and then run back, and kind of, we would always kind of short things a little bit. So running wasn't my favorite in high school. And so like pole vault was fun because you got to jump on the mats, and it looked kind of ridiculous, and it was you get flung into the air. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one, and I did do it for a little while, D3 in college.
Well, I have another kind of quick series of get to know you questions. But one of them, no, I'll ask the shoe question. Normally, we don't have an entire episode talking about how you analyze your gear, especially shoes, but that is this episode. So we'll ask the quick get to know you questions, and then I'm sure we'll expand a lot on our shoe question. But my first quick get to know you questions, don't overthink it, is that if you could get an all expenses paid trip with guaranteed race entry to any race or running event that requires entry in the world, what would you choose?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I'm pretty lucky that I get to do that in a lot of ways, and so the one that I think would have been the most valuable to me was I did get to run Tokyo, and so that was to this day one of my favorite events. And then I got to do that with A6, and so they brought me along to get me a bib and to help me find lodging and all that stuff. So they hosted a trip with several media people. I got to do that a couple of years ago. That was super fun. And then um, this year I'm going to Sydney since it's their first year being a major, and so I think that yeah, that's going to be pretty high on my list too of I think of super fun races. But I've been to a lot of different places to run a lot of different races, and so it's kind of like, how do you top it? And I don't try to top it anymore. I just, a lot of it now is not always even the place or the event. It's like, can I bring people I know with me and do it with them? That's what makes, those are the kinds of things that are really exciting for me now.
I love that. Okay, second question. And actually would be very curious to know your answer if you have one readily available. Thinking back on all the shoes that you've ever worn, if you can, what has been your all time, I'm pretty sure those shoes were magic pair of shoes that you've ever worn? And it could be across any, it could be a pair of track spikes, like it could just be any pair of running shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like those were magic shoes. I mean, that always is going to change because there's always going to be something. Well, hopefully, there's always going to be something better coming along. And so when I think about questions like that, the kinds of shoes that I think back to, I'm pretty sentimental. So like, one of my favorite all-time shoes was the Nike Pegasus 34 Shield, and that's a pretty old shoe. But it was the first shoe that I ran with. I got to get to run through the winter living in Chicago. And so that should kind of help me feel like I could do this. I don't have to kind of take a break from running all winter long. I can kind of keep this fitness going. And then I was like, oh, a lot of people do this. But I didn't know that at the time. And so that kind of like unlocked a different way to connect with running. And it turns out now that I'm a cold weather runner. I love winter running. Almost the colder, the better. I struggle a lot during the summer as well. And so like that kind of started my love of year round running and also winter running as well. So that shoe means a lot to me.
That is a magic shoe. And I love that answer because it's not the shoe that made me the fastest. It's the shoe that allows you to believe that anything is possible. That's the cool thing
Exactly.
about the shoe.
Yeah. Yeah, you get it.
You are the second person to specifically drop the Peg 34 as their
Oh,
favorite shoe ever.
okay.
Not the
Yeah.
Shield. And the Shield is the waterproof version. So everybody's like, what's Shield mean? That's when it's waterproofed.
Yeah, and they said there was like a little bit of extra like tackiness or grippiness on the outsole too, which was useful kind of in slippery, icy. Not so much icy. Icy is hard to deal with, but slushy, slippery stuff, it was a little bit better. But yeah.
All right, final get to know you question. What is your favorite run fuel these days?
These days I'd say it's probably just Gatorade. Because it's cheap, it's really easy to buy almost anywhere. And it tastes pretty good. And
Yeah.
so in the summer right now, I'm almost all liquids just because I do so bad and I sweat like crazy and I just need to replenish. In the winters, I drink almost no fluids and I'm all gels. But for right now, Gatorade and a lot of the other usual suspects. I love Scratch, I love Tailwind. Those are all really good too. But like Gatorade is kind of just like, that's the big filler because like sometimes those bags of Scratch and Tailwind add up a little bit and I need to kind of dilute the cost with a tub of Gatorade. And so right now, Gatorade, the red, that's what's getting me through.
I was going to ask you, and the correct question is not which flavor of Gatorade, it's which color of Gatorade do you prefer?
Exactly. Blue is also acceptable in our house. My daughter
Like
started running
the
too.
dark, like the original blue?
No, the light blue.
Nah, the glacier. Yeah, there is a
Mhm.
glacier blue. So I am also a
Yeah.
Gator aficionado. Very cool. Well, I mean, as people are probably getting a sense of, if they haven't already been tuning into this episode because they know exactly who you are and super excited to hear what you have to say. But Mike, you are the gear guy. You're the go-to. You know everything about everything, but especially when it comes to shoes. And I have to ask you, how did you get into this?
Yeah, I don't have any like background in like working in shoe retail or working at a shoe brand. I approach it from the idea of I'm just a runner and I want to explore new things and I like new things. I like shiny new stuff. And so for a while I was running in Pegasus 34s. Like that year, I think I bought maybe 5 or 6 pairs of Peg 34s because I was like, this shoe works for me. I really like it. I want them in a bunch of different colors. This is great. But then, like, starting right around the year after that, I was like, there are a lot of other shoes out there. Maybe I should try some other ones. I don't know where to begin. At the time, like, every running shoe, the copy for every running shoe on the website, like, read exactly the same. So I was like, I don't know what the difference is with any of these any of these shoes. I'm going to start exploring, trying some new things, and I'll just kind of give my feedback as I go. So a lot of it was like kind of, if I could put it in like a 2025 social media parlance, it'd be like a try with me, a Hoka Clifton. You know, like that's kind of like was the approach back in like 2017 or so, maybe 2018. Where I was like, all right, let's try a New Balance Beacon. What's this all about? You know, like people seem to like it, so let's try it. And that's how I kind of just started exploring and trying to understand new things. And then the questions that I had, the hard things that were for me to figure out, were the things that I wanted to talk about. Because if I didn't like quite get it right away, I'm sure other people didn't too. And so let's kind of start demystifying that, and help people to understand kind of what's out there along with me as I'm starting to figure it out too. And then somewhere along the way, people started talking about me as like the OG or like the expert. And I'm like, I'm still not sure I'm an expert, but I guess I've run in a lot of these shoes before. So I get here we are, you know. But that's kind of how it started, as just like a guy just wanting to try some new stuff. And there weren't enough videos at the time of people running in these shoes. And so I was like, I could figure out about a lot about laptops, about phones, about cameras. I could figure out a lot about trail shoes, but a lot of these running shoes there wasn't enough. So I was like, I guess I'll start talking.
My goodness, what a moment in running shoe technology to get into this. Like
Yeah, I was
you
really
joined the
lucky.
dawn of the super shoe and you're like, you were there when it happened. How awesome.
Yeah, a lot of things kind of like got lucky for me at the same time. Like social media had been around, but for like kind of adults to watch social media was still like a lot of the YouTube especially was still kind of new. And so like a ton of people weren't doing that yet, but I was watching a lot of YouTube, and so I started making my own YouTube videos. Running shoe technology was about to explode, which was also very lucky. And so like those two things at the same time was a really nice, fortunate combination.
Do you remember the first pair of shoes you actually reviewed in the way that you would recognizably say, yeah, that's the first thing I can say that was the original review?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a great question. No one's asked me that one before. I'm sure I could go back and figure out which one it is, but I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I do remember the first pair of shoes that were gifted to me for review was a pair of Peg Turbos. And a PR company had reached out. There was a pop up race happening in a parking garage in downtown Chicago. And before the event, like a handful of people were told to arrive early. And they, like, there was no box or bag or unboxing package. It was just like from a duffel bag, they're like, here, these are for you.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and it was so cool because at that point, like, I'd been buying all the shoes myself. And so like this was like recognition that someone thinks that what I'm making is worth looking at. And you know, it was my first pair of shoes. Now it seems to be a lot easier. There's like infrastructure for seeding, you know, packages and products for people to review. But back then it was a lot harder, or it felt a lot harder anyway. And so I remember getting like a pair of Peg Turbos like a month before they came out. And I felt like I was the only person in Chicago that had them for a long time. I probably wasn't, but they made me feel like I was. And so that was a pretty cool event. That's the first pair of shoes that I remember getting seeded to me.
Now, I have to ask, and as you've been doing this for so many years, I'm sure you absolutely have this figured out. But I know for some people, when they are looking to somebody who is reviewing gear, understanding that in a lot of situations now that gear is gifted, right? And I think a lot of people want to understand how you can retain your objectivity when some of these things are given to you free. But like, what does free really mean? How have you thought through this process and how do you keep things objective?
Yeah, I mean, I think about this kind of thing a lot, and I've been putting disclosures in my videos before a lot of people were doing it, and before there was a lot of more specific like FCC guidance on what needed to be in a video. And so this is something I think about all the time. In my prior life, I was a lawyer, so like legal disclosures are like the way that we live
This
in
isn't
the
like
legal community.
idle curiosity. You're like, no, 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 I know this
Yeah,
legally.
yeah. And so like there's both at the ethical perspective and then the legal in terms of minimal requirements kind of perspective where I look at it. And for me, I feel like at the end of the day, I kind of like have to be able to review shoes kind of like consistently. I might not always have the same kind of end conclusions as other reviewers, but like, you know, I have my set of preferences, the style of shoes that I tend to gravitate towards, and other people that tend to like the same shoes that I like should be also be able to say like, well, he liked that one, I should also like that one. He didn't like that one, I probably also won't like that one. So I need that kind of internal consistency across all my reviews, no matter how a shoe gets to me. And the remainder of how issue gets to me, I think, is a matter of provenance and disclosure, saying like, this is a pair of shoes I bought, or this is a pair of shoes that was sent to me. Here's how it came to me. If you feel like that's a problem, totally fine. That's up to you. But I'm letting you know that before I say a single word about what the shoe is about, I'm telling you that part first. You can weigh that information accordingly. You can look at my review with skepticism. You could disregard it entirely. That's up to you. But I've told you that ahead of time. The reason why you know to question how the shoe got to me is because I've offered that information to you. So that's kind of my promise to all viewers. And a lot of times people will say like, oh, well, it's not that common now, but back in like 2017, 2018, when I was starting doing this, people were like, oh, well, they sent you the shoe. So obviously this is a biased review. I'm like, if you think that, that's fine. Again, I'm the one that gave you that information. I just hope you apply that same rigorous standard to everyone and every piece of content you review, whether it's Runner's World, Men's Health, GQ, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Just apply the same, especially when they don't tell you how the shoe got to them. So just be fair is what I hope.
I like that. And it is tricky. But I personally have found that if you are discerning enough in your media literacy, which isn't always the case, but people who are taking the money and giving five-star reviews to like, it's very obvious sometimes when some people are not being genuine about their feelings about a product because of their relationship with the sponsor. So, I mean, it's important, I think, that we acknowledge this, right? That's all, especially with social media, anything can be said on social media. And so I think it's really important that you and people like you are doing things in this way so publicly and demonstrably to say, you guys, we can do this in a way that is ethical and fair and honest while also not having to spend tens of thousands of dollars of your own money buying shoes to review.
Yeah. And I think that, and it's not always so simple too, because like then in addition to that, some people do paid reviews and some people do affiliate links, and like I don't do paid reviews. I don't know a lot of people that are doing a lot of paid reviews. That seems to be kind of like a one clear line that people don't generally cross. But sometimes people do like paid content, which I don't personally have a problem with. I don't really do that. And then affiliate links, a lot of people do, but I don't like affiliate links for myself, because I feel like I don't want people to think that, oh, he's being overly generous to this shoe because he wants me to click on that affiliate link. And so like I feel like I'm very different from the rest of the field in that regard. But I might be, I guess less ethical in other kinds of ways. So everyone kind of has to figure out above the legal minimum requirements of disclosures, ethically, morally, what do they feel comfortable with? So there's a lot that we all have to figure out, and um, uh, anything else that I can't figure out, I'll just disclose away, and then everyone else can figure it out for me.
Has there been anything that anybody has sent you where you were actually, my question was, that was just so awful you couldn't even talk about it? But I guess that would be the review. Somebody sent you something and you're thinking, this is awful. I have to let people know that I hated this.
Yeah, I really don't like to. There's a lot of negativity on the internet, so I don't like
Yeah.
to make negative reviews. But sometimes things come out with such fanfare that it's important to comment on it. And so in those situations, I'll say like, yeah, I mean, this came out with a lot of hype. I was really excited for it. It sounded great. It looks great. But here's where I feel like the execution is off. So I'll try to be fair without like being like, you know, this shoe is all hype and you should trash it. I don't like clickbaity type of headlines. And so yeah, so like there are times where I will say what I think about stuff, but I try not to trash it because there's a lot of reasons why a product comes out the way it does. But there's also a lot of people that are working really hard, and the industry is surprisingly small. And so like you're going to end up meeting that person at some point. So you don't need to be unnecessarily mean, but you do have to be honest. Because again, at the end of the day, like disclosures, all that stuff, those are all very like visible indicators, and very topical and immediate indicators within each one video. But to have longevity in doing reviews, you have to be reliable, and that requires consistent performance over a lot of products, good and bad, so that people can be like, all right, well, when it is bad, he won't just say like this is great, and like sugarcoat it. He will save me money, because then I will avoid this bad shoe. But at the end of the day, like if a shoe does make it to market, every once in a while a truly bad product can make it to market. But usually when a product does make it to market and there's like marketing, manpower behind it, if it doesn't, if I think it's terrible, it's usually because it's not meant for me. And so I always try to give it like, all right, do I like this? Yes or no? If I don't, is this because there's someone else that this is really for, and I maybe just not the right person to be reviewing it? And if I think, oh no, they were talking to me, I am the intended audience, and I still don't like it, then I'm like, yeah, the execution is off. So like, there's kind of like a hierarchy that I try to give multiple levels of benefit of doubt, because I'm generally not reviewing like, hey, I found out about this thing. It's just such an early startup. They only started up 3 weeks ago, and they're making shoes. Like that's not kind of my approach to product reviews. So I'm talking about products that are made by teams of people with the backing of global corporations. So like it's most likely the case, if I don't like it, it's because it's not for me.
That's a really good point that you raised. And you mentioned this earlier, that the shoes that you like because of how your feet are shaped and the kind of runner that you are, if other people are like you, then they will probably like the same things that you do. And that's how somebody can really get the most out of the information you provide. But what does that look like? So if you are describing yourself as a runner who likes these things, and when you say that, what does that mean?
Yeah, so for me, I'm a high mileage runner, so I like things that are a little bit more on the cushion side, and I like novelty. I like new things, so I want shoes that are a little bit more modern, and that tends to mean like really squishy dynamic shoes. Like I do a lot of slow motion running footage, and so you could see I'm like really squishing that foam, and it's coming back and decompressing. And if there's a nice rhythm to that, that equals fun in my mind. And so like those are things that I like. I tend to be a 4-foot striker, and so there's like weight has a factor to it. I think sometimes people pay too much attention to that, but like these are all like different aspects of who I am as a human. Like we're all very different, um in terms of the way we're shaped and the way that our bodies moved, and then our bodies are kind of perceive things differently. And it kind of ties into the kind of like the ethics discussion, because a lot of times people say like, well, I tried this shoe and he said it's soft, but I thought it was firm, so he's obviously lying and is bought and paid for, right? But it could just be like, I'm a forefoot striker, you're a heel striker. We're have different kind of like running styles. Our ground contact times might be different. Some shoes are designed with heel strikers in mind, and some shoes are designed with more midfoot, forefoot strikers in mind. And so, something that I've been spending the last couple of years trying to emphasize over a wide variety of videos is soft is a subjective term that means a lot of different things, and it's surprisingly complex. And so, like that's what it means to have like different preferences, is that like we just all move differently, and there isn't one best soft shoe. There isn't one best fast shoe. We're lucky enough now in 2025 that there are so many options out there, and the market has really caught up from a couple of outliers early on in kind of the carbon plate wars, where every brand has their own super shoe, or every brand has a really great modern daily trainer. And the differences are kind of almost philosophical differences in terms of like, what does a runner need for their daily training? And so like what Brooks thinks that a daily trainer should be is very different than what like Hoka or Asics thinks that a daily trainer should be. And so their shoes will start to reflect some of those differences in terms of what does comfort mean? What does soft mean? What's stable? Those are all differences that the brands kind of approach in a way that they think will suit most people. But, depending on what their definition of most is, you can end up with a very different feeling shoe. And so sometimes people are like, these are both daily trainers, but you said you really like one, you really don't like the other. How can that be? And it's like, well, one is for a daily trainer that suits one kind of person's preferences, and one is that suits my preferences. And they're not similar shoes in the sense that they feel similar underfoot, but they're doing the same jobs, and so those are some of the things that I'm trying to, explain to people now that I've been, making shoe reviews for a long time, in terms of like, um, you know, there can be some generalizations you can make about a brand, but like each shoe is so different these days. They're trying to tailor shoes to different subcategories of people and use cases, that it's becoming a little bit overwhelming in terms of the product offerings. But that's the other side of that, is that's really good for runners too, because now it's not just like going back to like kind of the beginning of carbon plated super shoes. It either was they worked for you, or unfortunately they don't. Now it's like, oh, they don't work for you. We got 6 other ones that you could try. One of those might work, And so like it just takes a little bit more time, but the plus side is there's more like catering to individuals, rather than saying like, here's what runners like, and you get one option.
Well, I love the carbon plate wars phrase. Going back to that, it wasn't even if this carbon plate shoe, it was, do the Nike Vaporflies work for you or not? Like that was the choice.
Right.
Speaking also of squishy shoes, because I actually did want to ask you, what is the squishiest shoe that you've ever worn?
Yeah, I'd say the squishiest shoe right now, I feel like Mizuno is making some very squishy shoes, like the Neo Vista and the Neo Zen. That material is really squishy. But here's another like technical term I've developed. Those shoes are a little bit mushy for me as well. So squish is how much the foam compresses when you land on it. But the difference between a mushy shoe and a fun shoe, sometimes mushy shoes are fun, but the difference is like a mushy shoe kind of stays flat for a little bit too long. And so like I equate those to like trying to run in a pair of UFOs or like recovery sandals. They're just like a little too soft to be peppy. And so like for a shoe to be fun, it has to squish and unsquish at the right tempo for your gait. And so timing, so I would say like softness is a function of time, which is a very complicated way of like talking about a shoe. But I feel like that also makes sense, because it depends. Like if you have, it depends on your ground contact time, which can also depend on your pace. And so like what's soft for a speedier shoe is not the same as what's soft for a max cushion recovery, like time on feet kind of shoe. And so all those things are a little bit different. And so for the beginner, it's overwhelming. And, a good daily trainer, don't overthink it. because you're beginning and you don't really you can't feel those differences anyway, because you're probably just trying to get in shape and you're like, I just want to not pass out by the end of this run. But as you start to run more and you're like, well, today is supposed to be a little bit speedier, so I want something that's going to rise to the occasion. And so you might want something that is a little bit more tailored to responsiveness, which is the way it responds to being squished. So it's a little peppier. But I might be feeling a little bit tired and beat up today, so I want a mushy shoe because I just want to kind of wallow in comfort as I'm, shuffling my feet for 30 minutes the day after a long run. And so these are some kind of ways that I've been looking at shoes a little bit differently and kind of exploring, why do these shoes all feel so different? And why, when it used to be like, oh, the stack height is 25 millimeters, I know exactly what this shoe is all about, is how shoes used to be. But now it's such a dynamic and complex equation because there's stack height, but also foams and geometries, and are there stabilizing elements in the foam like a plate? So there's a lot more there. And so as I've been trying to figure out, why do people keep putting these things in shoes, I've had to kind of figure out, oh, this is what they are doing to the shoes. And then I'm trying to translate that and explain it in my reviews.
I don't want to get too technical about materials, but even just this conversation about the ways we describe things, squishy, mushy, snappy, I know, especially for runners who may not be as familiar with all the different features that you can get in a running shoe now, it is very overwhelming. And so what do you like? Do you like it to be responsive? Do you like a lot of cushioning? Sometimes I find that we're using words to describe like whole huge categories. So I know from my experience, a lot of runners get confused about if a shoe is cushioned versus it has a lot of foam or has a high stack height. And so I wonder if there's any sorts of terminology or ways that you have found to describe things that you find more clear in the explanation than maybe some traditional literature or marketing phrases about how a shoe is feeling.
Yeah, I mean, squishy, mushy, and responsive are words that I use a lot. And then another one that I rely on a lot is like dense. Or sometimes I use like, this feels more traditional or old school. And so like, a shoe like the Bondi is a very tall shoe, but the foam is kind of dense on that one. I think that one's great if you have a longer ground contact time, if you're a run walker, or if you want to use a shoe that you're going to be standing on your feet a long time. Soft is going to feel more dense for someone that is not like moving the feet quickly, right? And so a shoe like the Bondi has its audience, and those people love it because it's soft. But I haven't really loved the Bondi because that's not soft to me. I feel the denseness of that foam, and so I want something that's airier, something that's lighter. Which, when you think about airy, like think about like a cake or squeezing like a piece of bread, like something that's airy. There's going to be a lot of movement when you give that little bit of squeeze to it. And so those are things that I feel like are soft. And I think of those as kind of like landing into a high jump pit, where like you hit the pit and the pit absorbs you and then it bounces you back up. And so that to me is what feels like soft. And so like those are different kinds of shoes where there's a lot of dynamic is a word I use a lot, where there's a lot of movement to the foam. And so that is what feels soft to me. And so like the Glycerin Max, I feel like is a really great example of that dynamicness. The Asics Super Blast 2 is a great example of that, where I feel like the foam moves a lot, kind of like a crumple zone, but it also then lifts you back out of it because it doesn't stay mushy at the bottom. It kind of squishes down and then pops right back up. And so I feel like that tempo of that squishing down and popping back up makes a big difference. And I feel like those denser shoes, they squish slower and they come back up slower. But if you're touching the ground longer in it, it's coming back to you at the right tempo. So I think of a lot of times like either like a crumple zone or jumping on a trampoline. If you don't bend your knees at the right pace for a trampoline, you're going to kind of wobble and it'll be herky jerky. But if you get that tempo just right, then you're going to get a really nice bounce on that trampoline. And I feel like matching yourself to a shoe is like finding that right tempo of like how much does that shoe kind of compress and decompress. And that's kind of what I'm listening for, feeling for when I run in a shoe, is like, is this matching up at the right tempo of softness and then responsiveness for this type of shoe. If it's a faster shoe, then that process has to be quick. If it's a recovery run shoe, then it should be a little bit slower so I can shuffle my feet a little bit more. And so, without talking about foam specifically, but like there's denseness and there's like airiness to it. And that's kind of a big separator. Just simply having a tall shoe doesn't tell you the whole story.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I started talking for a really long
No,
time
no, no,
there,
it's
and so
good.
I'm sorry about
Somebody
that.
walked by my window and I was
Oh,
gonna
okay.
like jump in my question and then I saw movement and then my brain just dumped its, working memory. Um, I know where I was going with this. I must admit, I have never once considered the, I want to say, responsiveness with a timing with regards to foam, because that makes perfect sense to me now that I think about it. Like, of course, that makes sense. But I also know that some people are probably going to jump in on your YouTube and maybe on my Instagram to say, but how do I know what that's supposed to feel like when I'm wearing my shoes?
Yeah, it feels like you like this shoe. This feels good, And so like like a lot of times people will try the shoe on, kind of do like the stand up from the bench where they tried it on, like rock back and forth. That's not really enough. Like at best, if you could do a little bit of jogging around the store, if you could hop on a treadmill, even better. I feel like if you don't know, like the more you don't know how to express what you like, the more you're gonna have to go with this one agrees with me or this one doesn't. And to do that, you could hopefully would go to a place that lets you try them on a treadmill for at least a little bit so you can get that sense, or has enough floor space where you can kind of do a little bit of a jog around some of the merchandise. Because that's the way, I mean, these are all very like maybe too many words ways of describing I like this shoe or I don't like this shoe, And so like if you're not sure how to express like your preferences yet, I think the best thing to do when you go to a running store is say like, I've been running in this. It's okay, but here's where I wish it were better. Or I like a shoe just like this, but mine are old. Can you help me? Like going with what I like or what I don't like. Those are really great ways to start a conversation on figuring out what shoe to get next.
Now, I don't want to get too into the weeds about what specific shoes you might recommend. You must get this question all the time with people asking you, hey, Kofuzi, if I'm going to build a rotation, what are the basic parts of my rotation, the different shoes that have different characteristics? What should be in that rotation?
Yeah, I would always start with a daily trainer because they're built to be more durable. They're built to be versatile, pace versatile. So like they can do the everyday run that you should hopefully not be something that is totally gassing you out every time, but is a nice easy run so you could do a lot of miles during the week. And then something that you can go a little bit faster if you need to and a little bit slower if it's a recovery run or an easy run kind of day. And that you can run with for most of your runs most of the days of the week. If you're running 3 days a week, you probably only need one shoe, and a good daily trainer is plenty. you know After that, then you will probably want to get a race shoe. And so then you maybe want to get a carbon plated shoe, or you just might want to get something in like the tempo shoe category. So the four categories of shoes that I typically look at are daily trainer, max cushion, tempo, and then racing shoe. So the second one I usually have people look at is a racing shoe because that's fun. People like to have their feel good fast day kind of shoe. And if you're getting ready for a 5K, then what a great way to kind of reward yourself for the journey as to get a really fun pair of racing shoes. And then after that, you might want a max cushion shoe. And so that's something for the days after a big race, something that's going to be really comfortable, maybe a little bit more stable than you normally like, because on those days, maybe your knees aren't doing as well of a good of a job supporting you, or maybe your ankles aren't. And so you need a little bit of help. And then the fourth shoe would be a tempo shoe or a second daily trainer. So like those are like the four categories of shoes that I look at. But most people probably don't need four shoes. I like having more than four shoes. It's fun to have more than four shoes, but at a like you really only need one. And for a lot of people, two is going to be great.
I always like to remind people that one good pair of shoes is great if you have the means to buy 100 pairs, go for it. Like nobody's saying that you can't if you want to. But I think people, especially with everything being so visible, we feel a lot of pressure to buy the right gear, quote unquote, so I can achieve the goals I want to achieve. And the tool, the gear, is just one thing to help you. So yeah, if you're seeing people, and I understand and I do appreciate you're sitting in front of your own wall of shoes, but let's be real, this is literally your job. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that, like, it's okay to have more than one shoe than you really need. It's not a minimalism contest either. It's not a maximalism contest either, but, like, if these are fun and they make you happy and it helps you get excited about training, which is, good for your fitness and your overall well-being, then I feel like it's kind of a small price to pay. I remember when I was starting to run, like, GPS watches, like run, long distances training for my first marathon, like GPS watches really weren't a thing yet, but like mapping your run and like starting to gamify your data was starting to become a thing. And for me, based on kind of other things that I like, that was really motivating. So like being able to see a run streak, not that everyone needs to run streak. I don't even run streak, but like in the beginning, seeing like 4 days in a row of running, that was really encouraging. It's very positive reinforcement for me. If getting another pair of shoes is very positive reinforcement for you, and you're not just buying them and having them sit on a shelf, but you're, using that to encourage your own running, I feel like that's also a very healthy way to approach it. And so like, you know, I get criticized a lot for encouraging people to buy way too many shoes. Um, but I also
what,
spend a
like
lot
you're
of time.
marching over to their house, dragging them out of bed, making them go to the
Right.
store, demanding their credit card. Like
Yeah,
people can make their own choices.
exactly. But I also am very realistic about, like, people ask me what's the best shoe to start out. And I'm like, the ones that you have right now. I don't care if they're work boots. Don't let like not having stuff stop you from starting. Start first, then you'll start realizing where your needs are once you start, and then problem solve from there. Like, all right, these make my feet hurt. Okay, well, maybe some different shoes will help. I'm getting really thirsty on this. All right, well, maybe you need to bring a handheld, but just start and figure out let the problems come to you, and then you could solve them. But you don't have to buy all this stuff ahead of time to be able to start any of this.
It's also when you're looking at somebody's shoe collection, especially if you're newer to the sport, it might not register that that person has been collecting or buying shoes for a decade or more. I think so. Sometimes when we see pressure, and I thought this when I was newer and getting into the sport, and I also like shoes, so that didn't help. But I thought, oh my gosh, how many shoes do I really need? And of course, the right answer for me at the time was two, because I lived in Florida and my first pair would get so soaked in sweat they hadn't dried by the time I went for my run the next day. So I did need two pairs, but yeah, it didn't need fancy shoes. But I want to go back for just a hot second and ask you very quickly the four categories of shoes. One of them is a tempo shoe. How is a tempo shoe different from a racing shoe?
Yeah, so in the beginning days of racing shoes, tempo shoes were a lot more important because the racing shoes didn't last very long. And so you wanted to kind of save your miles on those. And then people were also, there's still a lot of it out there today. People then were also like terrified of running too often in carbon. And so the tempo shoe was the kind of shoe that is built more like an old school racing shoe. Has
Like a
some.
racing flat?
Yeah, so to be lighter, lightness is a priority. There's not as much kind of padding and puffiness for comfort of the upper in it as well, and it's built more like a racing shoe, but it has more durability like a daily trainer. So it can handle more use. It can be reached for more often than say a racing shoe might, um, but it can also handle that because it has some of those durability features. And because of that, you're not going, as fast. It's not as high performing of a shoe. So it kind of sits in the middle. And that also is an area where I have a lot of people look if maybe they don't want a carbon plated shoe for whether maybe they don't like the carbon plated shoes. Maybe they haven't worked for them, or maybe they don't want to spend as much. The tempo shoe is also another great place to look. Some people use
So
their tempo shoes. Okay.
do you lump the nylon plated shoes into this category?
Generally, a lot of times. I mean, the nylon plate, you know, almost all Asics shoes had nylon plates back in like the early 2000s, and we didn't think of all of those as they were, I mean, they were there for stability reasons. So plates can do a lot of different things, depending on kind of how they're constructed. And so, but yeah, a lot of like the nylon plated shoes and even a lot of carbon plated shoes now, they will be meant to be used kind of as a tempo shoe, where some people might use them every day, but they can also definitely handle a lot of workouts. But for racing, you still might want even another category of performance higher. And so they kind of sit in between those two categories. It's a category that I feel like, to get kind of like nerdy about it, like has changed in importance a lot over the last, say, like 5 years because of how carbon plated racing shoes are changing. And basically with how comfortable we've all become with spending $250 on a pair of running shoes. The tempo shoe has like waxed and waned in terms of how important it is.
Or I think of a tempo shoe and kind of where that sits for me in my rotation is like philosophically a shoe that is more aggressive than my daily trainer, but less aggressive than my race day shoe.
Yeah, that's
And
a great
so
way to
for
think
me,
of it.
a lot of nylon plates, right? So like
Mhm.
the Saucony Endorphin Speed, one of my holy grail shoes, that's for me I can race in it and I have, but it is, I mean, I call it a workout shoe first and foremost. So tempo shoe.
Yeah, workout shoes, speed day shoes, tempo shoes. It's a category of 1,000 names. But yeah, that's exactly how I would use it as well. And if you think about it, it's just kind of like when I talk about max cushion shoes and tempo shoes, those are all subcategories of daily trainers. If you think, I mean, really, technically, I would say that there's really only two categories of shoe: race day shoes and not race day shoes. Everything else is a subcategory of daily trainer. And that's another way of kind of trying to simplify things. Do you want a big daily trainer? Do you want a fast daily trainer? Do you want a versatile daily trainer? And so that's really like the kinds of questions that you're answering when you're talking about all these different categories. And it's only because at the end of the year, I put together like my best of categories where I'm like, well, putting a really tall max cushion stack height shoe in the same category and comparing it against an endorphin speed is kind of weird because they're not really doing the same thing, but they're all kind of, you could use them all the same way if you wanted to, if you only wanted to have one. Um, but there's enough differences kind of so that it might make it sense to lump some of them closer to each other than others. So it's all a little bit arbitrary, but it becomes helpful at a certain point to making these subcategories.
Did I hear you mention earlier that carbon plated shoes, the foam that we use has become more durable? Like we're no longer worried about our carbon plated shoes just completely evaporating after 100 miles?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly still ones that are very short in duration, but it seems to
The
me,
Adidas one, that's like a
it,
one race shoe, right?
yeah, that one definitely did not last. I've had some friends that ran in it and they liked it for a lot longer than the like estimated amount. For me, it pretty much lasted about 60 miles before I was like, I don't like running in this one anymore, which is weird because it was a $500 shoe. But like because of like the response to something like that, the brands are like, all right, well, this foam is great, but people are going to get mad at us if we make this and charge $500 for it. So we have to make it last longer. And for me, as someone that likes novelty, and maybe it's because, I'm a jaded reviewer and I see, 50 to 75 different shoes a year, I'm like, let's kind of keep those, like they don't have to be for everybody, but like, let's not make everything not every shoe has to be an endorphin speed. I also love the endorphin speed, but I don't want every shoe to be like the endorphin speed. Like I would trade a couple of miles for a little bit more fun at my marathon effort. And so that's kind of how I thought of it. And so for me, like I remember those early Vaporfly 4%, and I'm old enough to remember the first Vaporflies were the Vaporfly 4%, not the Vaporfly Next percent. I feel like we've forgotten that somehow. But I felt like those were great for racing for like 125 miles. And then they were a good workout shoe. And so another reason why the tempo shoe category has kind of waxed and waned, because then like I just use my old racers for my workouts. But now a lot of these new foams, I feel like some of the Zoom X specifically isn't as fun as it was before. And I think it's because they made it last longer. I think that's the trade-off. Yeah, I think the nature of that foam is that way. Um, but there's also new foams that are coming out that are very fun to run in and do last a very long time. And so that's where the technology is going. I'm okay with the trade-off, but it seems like, those nerds in the chemical factories, they're figuring it out. They're giving us the best of both worlds. Really fun, fast foams that last a reasonably long amount of time too.
Oh, this is going to be very exciting next few years.
It's a good time to be a
Well,
runner.
it is. Let's talk, if you wouldn't mind, a bit about your process. How the
Mhm.
heck you can how you review your shoes in a way that you can get the most out of them, get the biggest picture of them. And I want to start with a question that I get from people about shoes is how many miles do I need to run in my shoes before I can know if they're the right shoes for me?
Yeah, I think the answer to that I think the easier to answer question is, like, it takes very little time. It should take very little time for you to know if it's a wrong shoe for you. Right. And so people are like, I ran in this shoe. You gave it a pretty good review, but I didn't like it. Like, how many miles should I give it before I realize it's not for me? And I'd say 0.
Zero.
If you don't like it, you don't like it. I always say life's too short to run in shoes you don't like. And running's hard enough, like, make it easier on yourself. Find a pair you enjoy. But like, I think that the shoes aren't made out of like the blocky EVA. Even the EVA shoes now are very different than the EVA shoes 20 years ago. And so, like, in 2025, a shoe shouldn't need 50 miles of break in. Like, that, to me, that's not right. To me, when people tell me that, I'm like, your body got very accustomed to that shoe, and now you're growing to like it. The shoe hasn't changed that much, that it went from a shoe that you couldn't tolerate to now it's great because it's broken in. And also, the uppers aren't made out of leather. These aren't baseball mitts. Like, they should feel good right away. If they don't feel good right away, like, there's a handful of times where it was like, this thing was kind of like poking my arch a little bit for the first run, and after the second run it was gone. That's maybe something that happens, but for the most part, like, if it usually is not going to get a lot better. And so I'd say, like, it should be good out of the box. Some things that you might notice over time are like, well, this shoe gave me chafing. That sometimes takes a little bit of time to notice. It may take, an hour long run before you really figure that part out, which is hard because you don't get to test a shoe for an hour before you buy it. But like, in terms of liking a shoe, like, you should respond to it pretty quickly.
So I'm sure that you have your process down to an art and a science at this point. So what is your kind of nose to tail? You got a new pair of shoes that's in the lineup for you to review. Like, what's the very first thing? What's the very first step you take with those all the way through to finishing that review?
It's a weird thing, but the first thing I normally, because I have a live stream that I do, and I'll typically unbox a lot of shoes. Most of them don't come in like a fancy unboxing like pack. It's not a PR package. Last time it's just a regular box of shoes. But I'll show the shoe to the audience, and we'll weigh it just to see what shoes weigh, and then I usually end up smelling it because sometimes shoes are really stinky. They're not in like someone's foot's been in it, but like sometimes it gives off a real strong chemical
Oh yeah,
odor.
like the glue that they use can
Yeah.
be very yeah.
And some brands just smell more than others. And it's just a funny thing to note. And you just get a variety of smells, and it's kind of weird, but it's fun. The live stream is a strange place sometimes. But
What's the best smell? If you're like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna be excited to smell this pair of shoes. Which brand has the best smell?
I think the best you could really hope for is kind of like, this smells like a convention center that's just been cleaned.
Okay.
Like,
Kind of
that's
like
kind of,
shampooed carpet.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not. I mean, I've never had one that's like, oh, strawberries. It's not like that. But there's some that are like, oh man, this smells like a paint bucket. Like, I think I'm gonna get sick if I just inhale this for a long time. So there's like, those are the things. But the real reason for the smelling the shoes is to test breathability of the fabric. So there's a method to it. But it also is funny to note it's very breathable, and it smells like a seatbelt, just how it comes out. But that's not really part of the review process. The only thing I really like to know about a shoe ahead of time is what's it for. So that way I can give it the kind of run it needs. If it's a racing shoe, then I want to have like a tough workout that I could give it like race like conditions. If it's a max cushion shoe, I'll wait for a day where I just had a big workout and now I need something big and cushy. If it's a tempo shoe, I'll wait for another workout kind of day. So that's like the only real thing I like to know. Apart from that, I try not to know much about the shoe. I end up usually finding out stuff or knowing stuff, or I can assume stuff because it's the sixth version of a shoe and I've reviewed the last four, you know. But I try to read it as cold as I can, so I could just think about, does this match the intended use case? How is this different from the other shoes in this shoe's heritage? You know, if it's a number 6, how is this different from number 5, 4, and 3? And is it doing a good job? Am I having fun? Like, those are the things that I'm really looking for. I try not to know what the materials are. I try not to know what the stack height and the drop is ahead of time, because I feel like those can often cloud or color your response to a shoe if you know them ahead of time. So a lot of times I just don't know,
So
until
you
I'm
know
about to
that's
write the review.
I really like that because yeah, you're right. Is if you're like already in advance know, hey, the shoe that I just unboxed has an 8 millimeter drop. You already are assigning characteristics to that shoe based on your experience. But do you is that part of what something you even measure or look at before you try them on? Or are you like out of the box? I know the basics about this shoe, but I'm just gonna wear them for a while and then you go back and look at that information?
That's right. Yeah. So
Cool.
I mean, there's a lot of times I just end up knowing stuff because I'm on social media a lot and I see my feed is a lot of running, as you can imagine. And so it's like,
No.
I end up like coming across facts. But I don't really look at the sheets. A lot of times I'll ask the brands like, hey, can you send me like some of the tech specs on this? And it'll be like 2 days before I'm about to shoot the video for the review, because I haven't thought about it. Cause I'm trying to think of like, do I like it? Why do I like it? What is this doing underfoot? um, and trying to put those thoughts. Those are the things that I'm thinking about. The actual numbers, I consider that like reading the syllabus at the beginning of a school semester. Like, I try to rifle through that as fast as possible, and I try not to think about it too much, because at the end of the day, those are all like ways of describing what does it feel like. And that's what I try to spend more time on. What does it feel like? What does it remind me of? What does it not remind me of? You know, those I think are helpful ways of describing. Because if reading all those tech specs was enough, I wouldn't be necessary. You could just read the tech sheet too, and then I'd be superfluous. But the reason why the tech sheet isn't enough is because there's so much more to the experience of a shoe than just the numbers.
Has there been a pair that you've tried and initially you thought, eh, and then you end up loving them?
Yeah, I know that's happened. I can't think of any off the top of my head where I've really turned around on him. For the most part, like, you know, sometimes I get criticized because I don't put enough miles in a shoe before I put out a review. But a lot of
How
times,
many
like,
miles do you usually get?
it tends to be about 20 to 30 miles in a shoe before I make the review. Um, but I really, for the most part, I usually don't need more than a couple of miles before I can. And maybe I'd like to think it's because I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm like a shoe sommelier, I guess, in a way. Like, people talk about wines, I have no idea what they're talking about. And I talk about shoes, and people, I think, gloss over a lot of times when I talk about stuff. And I feel like that's the same thing. I just can pick it up. I don't know. My foot is sensitive. I'm not sure how it is, but it doesn't take me very long, and my mind doesn't usually change all that much.
I mean, I understand the, I want to say criticism, but just like the, hey, is that enough miles? I would, in my opinion, think this guy's been doing this professionally for what, 8 years now? If you need 100 miles per shoe, I don't know that you're all that good at what you do because that seems like you shouldn't need that much information.
Yeah, I mean, and I do 100-mile reviews. I don't know that I invented the 100-mile review, but as like a YouTube category, um, I don't remember people doing 100-mile reviews before I did them. But part of my backstory is like people weren't giving me shoes, so I didn't have new shoes to constantly review. So I would review the same shoe multiple times. It used to be like first review 100 miles and then 250. were my review points because I didn't have enough shoes to review. So I just reviewed the same one over and over at different points in time. But like, and now I still do a 100-mile shoe review for shoes that I like. Because I do think is an important kind of like benchmark. It's not the end of life of a shoe by any means, but it gives you a sense of like, all right, this is wearing down at about the rate that I would expect. But for the most part, every 100-mile shoe review is wearing down at about as quickly as I would expect. There's still as much life in this shoe as I would expect, and my opinions on the shoe really haven't changed all that much. But I still do those because I think that they're important to do. From like just a double checking my own thoughts and to make sure that I can validate some of my own results, even if I'm internally validating. And sometimes like my opinions won't really change on a shoe. I think maybe the Rebel version 4 is probably the most drastic change I can think of in recent memory. Where I was like, this is pretty good.
Tell us more.
Well, I was like, this is a PIBA EVA blend. It seems like they cheaped out. They could have gone all PIBA on it. And then by the end, my 100-mile review, I was like, no, I feel like PIBA EVA is the right mix for a daily trainer because this is a daily trainer. And so it can go fast, but the EVA, I feel like evens it out a little bit. So it's a little less squishy than it might otherwise be. And so like it fits for a daily trainer. It's working. And so that's kind of one where I changed my mind on. And I ended up loving that shoe. It's my favorite daily trainer for 2024. But the main change that I see is like, all right, well, this is a shoe that could be used for XYZ, but I ended up only reaching for it for X. So that's kind of like the thing that is really the most important from the 100-mile review, unless there's like the rubber on this one is disintegrating, which is very rare these days. But just in case that does happen, it's something I do like to talk about. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, here's what ended up happening over time. I liked it less and less for these other things, and I really only liked it for this. So is it worth it? If you really like that kind of shoe and need it for that, so that kind of helps with like the kind of buying guidance. And usually by then I space out the miles on it. So that shoe may be on sale soon, or other shoes that are similar to it might be on sale now. So I could say like, all right, well, this shoe is still full retail, but since my original review, now these other shoes that I think are pretty similar, some of them are on discount. So save $40, get this other one instead. So that's where the 100-mile review is useful.
That is, if anybody, again, thinking to the buying multiple pairs of shoes, if you know what you're looking for and you know what you like, you can clean up with sales. I mean, I remember when they moved to the Saucony for years, the Saucony Ride was my daily trainer. And I think I tapped down on the Saucony Ride 15 is the last version that I really truly enjoyed. I still have 2 unopened boxes. I bought like 15 pairs of them when they went on super clearance. But actually that leads me to kind of one of my final but just random questions that I have for you. These shoes that we buy that then maybe end up sitting in our closet for a period of time, what happens to them? If I have a brand new pair of shoes in box, but they're 5 years old, has that shoe changed? Can I still wear it?
Yeah, 5 years is an interesting number. So I would say if it's like 3 to 4, I'd be like, it's probably fine because you know how it's been stored. And it hasn't been stored like in wild temperature swings of like a not temperature controlled warehouse, where it's
Is that
been
like
really hot in the summer.
yeah, storage unit in Florida? No.
Yeah. And so like how it's been and stored. Um, and I would say 3 or 4, yeah, no, I wouldn't even blink an eye to that. At 5, I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't have personal experience with shoes that I've kept for 5 years, or that I know how they've been stored for 5 years. I feel like by 10, your big problem will be adhesives. And so like parts of the upper might start to kind of like fall, not the upper materials themselves will fall apart, but like the things holding it together might become problematic. And some of the adhesives, like with the rubber to the midsole or the midsole to the upper, might start to become a problem at like 10 years. Older foams, like the EVA foams, those fell apart pretty quickly too. And so like that I'm not sure how long that would last. And that's some of the older shoes you'd actually be worried about the foam falling apart. But some of these newer foams, to the detriment of the environment, I think, are gonna last a lot longer. And so it's also weird to be talking about, like, in my mind, it doesn't make sense because we're talking about like 3 or 4 is maybe good, 5 maybe no, but all at the same time, like when this goes in the landfill, it'll last for like millennia. So like I have a hard time wrapping my own mind around that. Um, and the implications of that as someone that kind of promotes people buying a lot of shoes. That's another thing that I think about. Maybe not enough, but a lot. But yeah, I would say like I'm a big proponent of stocking up on shoes that work for you. The more hard of a time you have finding the right shoe, the more you should buy a lot of that shoe, especially when it goes on sale. And I would say, I mean, if you know of anyone, if anyone ever has information that I'm like, yeah, I bought like a pair that I know a lot of people have hoarded is like the New Balance Beacon version 3. That was a great shoe. Like if anyone's like, yeah, I still have a pair, I think it's been like 7 years since that shoe came out. Like I'd love to see it. Like the day you're ready to run in it, let me know. I want to see some pictures of how the shoe looked. Like send them to me. Normally, I don't ask people to send me shoe pictures because then I do, and then I get a lot of shoe pictures. But like a really old one that's fresh out of box, I would love to see stuff like that because I actually don't know. But I would say generally hoard the shoes that really work for you because they will change.
I feel like, I mean, not at all to say what you should be doing, but that would be a fascinating thing to see if there are people who could find new inbox shoes of certain models, 5, 6, 10 plus years and do a side by or do a comparison or to see,
Yeah.
especially if it was a shoe that you originally reviewed.
Yeah, the
Crazy.
hard thing is about that is one of my favorite sayings. Like I had, like softness is a function of time. Another one of my favorite ones is nostalgia is the softest midsole. And so that would be the hardest part about doing that is like if you did have a new inbox old shoe and you put it on in 2025, you'd be like, I don't know. I feel like it degraded. It might not have at all. It might be the exact same shoe, but what we've become accustomed to, what we remember from back then is all coloring our experience of it. And so like that also to me is like I don't think that it's possible to test if a new inbox shoe is the same. Even if you had someone that, and I think especially if you had someone that was a big fan of that shoe and you brought them another pair like 5 years later, I don't think that they could give you an accurate response to it, because they will remember the shoe being a certain way. And I don't know that that will be accurate to what the shoe actually was like then versus what it is like now in this 5-10 year old state. So, but it's again, one of those weird shoe things I think a lot about is like if you could go back and find like an old storage unit full, maybe it was a temperature control storage unit and it was an old like Foot Locker that went out of business, and you had all these shoes. Would you be able to run in those shoes? I don't know. I would have a good time making that YouTube video and testing them out, but I don't know that any of the results would be meaningful. It would just be fun to think about.
It is very interesting how we acclimate to changing technology. Recently, I was rewatching 28 Days Later, right? The original in the which came out in 2000. And I remember watching it when it came, not right when it came out. I was probably a little bit too young for that, but like in a couple of years afterwards. And it was shot on digital. And at the time, you think, oh, this is such a great high resolution movie. And then you watch it 25 years later and I'm thinking, I can't even see him. They need to really run this shoe a sharper, like, so what was cutting edge? And I think we're seeing this in real time too, with all the technology with our shoes now, was cutting edge will soon be, oh my God, no, that's ancient history. Just like with all things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the visual technology is definitely one of them. Shoe technology, I think, also changed really fast, and so it's amazing to me now. Um, when I talked about tall stack height shoes, 5 years ago, the numbers are very different than they are now, and so I think people were freaking out about how tall shoes were getting 5 years ago. They're even taller now, but less people are freaking out about them, at least in my comments. Maybe they've already stopped watching because I only review these quote unquote extra tall shoes, and they're mad. But yeah, the speed with which we become accustomed to it has been remarkable.
Knowing that, like many things, there are trends in shoe technology or what is popular or less popular. Obviously, for good reason, though. The reason that we have these super high stack height is so they can cram all that amazing responsive foam into it. But I would be curious to know your thoughts. Where do you think we're headed? Are shoes going to get shorter? Are they going to get taller? Are these next foams going to change the world? Like, what do you think is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, or even 3 to 5 years, whatever you think that time frame near enough that we'll see it happen and still be able to reference this conversation as fresh in our minds?
Yeah, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see all the shoes get lighter. They may stay really tall because I think tall sells right now. But I think they're also going to get lighter. And so, I love those chemistry nerds that are figuring out ways to make these foams that have seemingly like opposite qualities, but they're put together. Like it's really cushioned, but it's also really light. That's really fast, but it's also really durable. Like those were previously things were mutually exclusive. Like the more fast you want it, the less durable it's going to be. The more fast you want it, the firmer it's going to be. You know, but they're able to do more with less, and it weighs less and it lasts longer. And it's amazing. And it seems like I'm selling snake oil here because you're like, oh, that sounds great. Zero downsides. Um, but that seems every year, maybe not every year, but with regularity, I'm amazed by advances in the foam technology. And I think that we saw bigger and bigger shoes. Then they were bigger shoes that lasted a little bit longer. Now we're going to have bigger shoes that last longer, but they're lighter. And so with that, as lightness becomes kind of like the next thing that people are chasing, the next marketing term that people are following, I think then we might see some shorter shoes again, because that's the next way to cut weight, is to put less of it in there. But if you could do more with less and keep it the same lightness or even more lightness, then again, that's more mores you get to put on the packaging, And so I think that's kind of the trend we'll see, is like, we'll still have really big shoes, but we'll also have really great, not gigantic shoes. I don't think that we're going to go back to, I mean, I think in fashion, we're starting seeing the trend away from like these giant, chunky shoes that were very popular for a while to now like basically like soccer flats are what people are running in. I don't think that road running shoes will quite get to that, but we're already seeing the pendulum swing from a style perspective, and from a technology perspective, we're able to kind of chase some of that as well. So I think we'll see some shorter, we'll never go back to like, really, really like true race flats for marathons anymore, but we're going to see ones that are not, that don't care about the 40 millimeter limit, I think, in the near future.
Is there any other technology? I think foam and the plates are what a lot of people focus on. Is there any other technology, a material, or a design feature that is possibly also on the cutting edge that we just don't know about yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing to think about would be traction, and also like the breathability of the uppers. And so like those are also things. A lot of like the shoes that we're looking at in the daily trainer category, they're a little bit warm. And I think part of that is because you need more material for it to be durable. But also like sometimes shoes have extra puffiness on it because it makes it fit a wider variety of feet. Right. And so um, like On has been innovating in like a spray on shoe. And so like that's a different kind
Wait,
of
wait.
upper.
What do you mean spray on shoe?
Oh, it's like cloudy with a chance of meatballs, but you don't put your foot in there. But there's like a robot, and it sprays like this weird kind of like rubberized plastic onto a mold of a foot on a midsole, and it makes a shoe. It takes 3 minutes for that part of the process. And so there are certain advancements in uppers as well that we're seeing. I don't know that there's as much to gain in the uppers as there is in the midsoles. I feel like that's basically what a running shoe is. It's a midsole, and you need a way to attach it to your foot, and you need a way for that not to slip. So that way the amount of energy transfer is not lost to slipping. And so like rubber that's very thin, lightweight, but still lasts a long time would be another level of advancement. But those aren't the kind of flashy advancements that are easy to talk about from like a marketing perspective. They're like, if you demand that your shoe lasts a little bit longer, we've got the rubber outsole for you. Is only really appeals to a small segment of the running market, an important part of the running market, but not everyone is super concerned about that, especially with racing shoes. So like midsoles are what that's the main part of the shoe. It's not just the engine of the shoe, it is the shoe. But like, especially in the summertime, I think about how swampy my foot gets, both from heat, but also from sweat dripping down my leg into the shoe. So like being able to shed moisture is important from racing, from daily training, everything. I think that's something that I'd love to see more advancements on. But on the other hand, like from the trail and from the winter perspective, keeping your feet warm and dry. Those are also other advancements that we could see as well. And then also from traction, being able to run on kind of modern surfaces, whether it's kind of like a somewhat slick paved surface in an urban area, you'll need a midsole or an outsole for that to give you traction. Or if you're trail running, or whether you're road running, you want to have as little bit as possible, light as possible, but it still needs to do its job, protecting the midsole, but also providing grip. And so like those are other areas where I think there could be advancements, but again, it's the midsole. That's the whole story.
What a world we live in. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here today and sharing some of your knowledge. And for hopefully we've introduced some new people to you so they can go ahead and find you on YouTube and start following you and learn from you, because we've just scratched the surface, I know, about all of the knowledge and information that you have. So I want to thank you again for being here today. Tell us where people can find you if they want to learn more about what you do or get into your orbit. How can they do that?
The best way is on YouTube, Kofuzi, Kofuzi. I do mostly running reviews, and then I also do some running and racing of my own. And so I like to make travel videos whenever I travel for a race. And so those are some other videos you might find on there as well. So if you either like running shoes or travel with running, that's a great place to find me. I'm also same username on Instagram.
I mean, come on. Running, travel, videos about running and travel. Sign me up. Any fun trips on the calendar for the rest of this year?
Yeah, so I've got 3. I go to Sydney next month to run the marathon.
That's
and
right.
then a couple weeks after that, I'll be going to Tokyo to watch the World Athletics Championships. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then my fast race for the year will be Valencia. So I'll be in Spain trying to see if I could hit one more PB. I'm in my mid 40s, so I'm like, maybe I have one more PB left in me. And so Valencia is probably my best real shot at it. So that'll be an adventure.
Is it the Valencia Marathon? Yes, because they have a very well-known half marathon. Is it the same race? Like they do the half and the full on the same day?
I don't think so. So I
Okay.
think the full, I think the half is at a different time of year. I could be
That's right.
wrong on
That's how
that
I was
one.
like, I think it's like in the spring or something. Okay. Oh,
Yeah, but
that's so
the marathon,
exciting.
yeah, it's in December. And so it's a tough time of year to be doing a lot of traveling. But I think that I'll put my family through the rigors of hard marathon training one more time. I'll still do marathons and I'll still be marathon training, but I think this may be, hopefully if things go well, this will be my last kind of real big PB chase for the marathon distance.
Well, I know I'll be rooting for you, as will we all, because which is nothing that we want more than a runner to achieve their goals. Seriously.
Thank you so much.
Mike, thank you again for being here today. I hope this is not our last conversation, and I will see you on YouTube.
All right, thank you so much.